We're at Hawks Landing Golf Club in Orlando, Florida. I'm here with Dr. Gio Valiante, Kim-Schaad, and we're talking the mental aspect of the game of golf. Things like developing a great pre-shot routine, how to have the right mindset to be more of a mastery golfer versus an ego golfer. If you don't know what that means, tune into this episode of Swing Expedition, and we're taking a deep dive into how to get your mind right to play better golf. Dr. Gio Valiante is one of the most prominent sports psychologists in the world and has worked with some of the best athletes in the NFL, NBA, and PGA Tour, as well as executives at the highest levels in many business industries. He currently serves as the head performance coach for the Buffalo Bills. However, Dr. Gio's work in golf makes him the most accomplished sports psychologist in the game. He has authored 2 books on psychology as it relates to golf and has worked with players such as Jordan Spieth, Davis Love III, Justin Rose, Matt Kuchar, and many others.
So I was getting my PhD at Emory University, and I remember telling myself the first year, if there's nothing tangible, nothing real about psychology, there's other things I could do with my life, but psychology had always interested in me. And of course, the more I learned, the more I realized the power of good psychology to be transformational. I got really lucky that early in my career, as I started applying this concept of fearless golf to golfers, the results were pretty immediate.
Joining Dr. Gio is his apprentice, Kim-Schaad. She crossed paths with Dr. Gio as she was working towards qualifying for the U.S. Women's Mid-Amateur Championship, an event that she not only went on to compete in, but went on to win in 2019. Afterward, Ina found herself moving towards a career in mental performance coaching and wound up becoming the first Fearless Golf certified mental skills instructor.
My own personal journey through golf and the transformation he was able to bring me through, I'm so grateful for that experience, including the painful moments that brought me to here. And if I'm able to replicate even an iota of that for other people, I just would be so grateful for that experience.
You guys have an amazing duo in the mental side of the game. Share with us a little bit of your overall philosophy framework of looking at that aspect of the game.
What we aspire to is a philosophy we call fearless golf, right? And this was born out of research I was doing as a young graduate student. And I was interviewing golfers of all skill levels saying, what's your psychological life like in golf? And the recurring theme was fear. Now, at the time, psychology was talking about self-esteem and confidence, all these psychological, but no one was talking about fear. And you come to realize that fear is the universal experience that all golfers experience. And so I titled the first book Fearless Golf, and eventually the book got translated into 7 languages because it struck such a common sense chord with so many golfers around the world.
Yeah. Okay, so now, you're a great golfer. You won the 2019 U.S. Women's Mid-Am Championship.
Yes.
How did you get into this overall mental side of the game and coaching?
When I met Dr. Gio, I had been just taking up golf again, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was really looking for so much validation and accolades outside of myself, and I was so much so that I couldn't really grow within myself and learn from the game. And so it eventually kind of culminated into a relatively toxic relationship with golf, to be honest. And so I sought out Dr. Gio's help, and he really helped me to see how to shift to mastery golf. And now I have to say, a much, much healthier relationship with golf. I really enjoy the game, and I can see where all my faults came from through junior golf, and really how we've been conditioned from junior golfers up into adults to become ego golfers. It's kind of not our fault, really.
And one of the fascinating things, if I remember, just hearing you talk about it, on that first day, it's such a classic story, right? Golfers, by the time they call a sports psychologist, they've already tried everything. We're always the last phone call, right? They've changed their golf swing. They've hired and fired a new caddy. And all of a sudden, we get the phone call, but we keep hearing the same story time and again and again. It's, I play great in my practice rounds. I'm great on the range. I go to the first tee. I shoot 67. I shoot 70 in my practice rounds, 85 in a tournament. So what's that psychological mechanism, that the suppressive force that takes a great golf swing? Chris, you work so hard to build great golf swings, technical excellence in golfers. And so the question becomes, how do you get those skills to express themselves? Every great golfer has a philosophy of how to deal with fear. That's sort of the hidden secret in the game that everyone's out there playing a little bit scared. Fear of judgment, fear of disappointment, fear of conditioning their own fear because of the way they react to the game, the way Ina was doing when she first came on. And so the ultimate goal is to get a golfer psychologically free and playing fearless golf. With a great mental game, a good golf swing just gets better. We know that fearless golf elevates skill, and when you're playing with a lot of self-doubt, it diminishes skill.
Gio, Ina, take us back in time and share with us something you know now that you wish you had known back in the day.
I think I can take this one.
You got it.
So I think if I were in a time machine and I went back to my former younger self, I would probably tell myself that, you know, golf and my identity are not the same. I choose to play golf because I love it, but it doesn't define me, and it isn't me with a capital M-E. And I am totally able to separate those two now. And it took me an extreme of taking 11 years away from the game to really come to terms with that. But I think, you know, hopefully for a lot of other people, they don't have to do that and go to that extreme.
Yeah, it's so crazy how when we're very passionate about something, it just really becomes like our self-esteem, our ego, and everything. And then that's on the line for every air quote success or failure we may have in that endeavor.
Yeah, and I think, you know, golf is the great teacher. You know, everyone loves when they're playing well and when they're scoring well, but you realize golf is a journey. And you're gonna spend some time struggling, but, you know, the brain naturally tries to avoid pain, right? So we shut down during unpleasant times, but we're always teaching golfers here at Fearless Golf is that's when you should be wide awake, because failure, you know, bad results, built in, the philosopher Rumi says, you know, the pain is the great teacher, right? You know, you got to learn from pain. And when golf is delivering us bad experiences, those are the best moments for growth. So I would tell any golfer who's struggling, don't run away from that moment. Look into it and look for the lesson that's built into it.
Lean into the pain and grow from it. I love it, guys. Awesome stuff. I'm here with Dr. Gio, Ina. Share with us your 20 seconds to greatness.
All right, Chris, I appreciate it. So everyone knows that, you know, I always say to golfers, you don't want your psychological profile to look like your scorecard. I don't want a golfer happy when they're making birdies and sad and frustrated when they're making bogeys and they're all over the place. So what we know is all great golfers have great consistent routines. And so I borrowed a concept from the great football coach Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer's won several national championships. He's now in the NFL, but is going to go down as a Hall of Fame coach. And he has a philosophy called 7 seconds of greatness. So he breaks football games down into 7-second individual. He says we got between 60 and 70 individual plays to win a football game. On offense, 60. So I want them all looking the same, consistent. And so we apply that to golf. So we've got a fearless golf routine. And what we teach our golfers is we want between 60 and 70, or depending on the skill level, between 70 and 80, independent routines. Just like you're in Vegas, every roll of the dice is an independent act. We do not want our golfers' emotional profile looking like their score. So we developed a 20-second routine that we take with us everywhere we go. You wanna demonstrate it, Ina? Right? And so we're gonna start off with, I'm gonna show one concept of why this fearless golf routine is built the way it's built. Ina, go ahead and hit a shot, and let's assume you hit a bad shot and hold your finish position. We'll show viewers how we condition our own fear.
You're gonna have to act really hard on this. I have not seen her hit a bad shot in a long time.
I haven't seen her hit a bad shot in 5 years. Right, so let's assume Ina had hit a bad shot here, right? So what we know is the amygdala, sort of the primal part of the brain, doesn't distinguish what causes, it's just a pleasure-pain mechanism, right? So Ina's standing over a golf shot, and the next shot, and, you know, as you're standing over that shot, you know, we always, and golfers are always trying to have positive thoughts. What's your brain actually gonna be doing in this moment?
Total fear of the outcome already.
And so as a function of that, they condition their own fear, which is why so many people are playing fearful golf. So this routine is designed to counterbalance the conditioning of one's own fear. You know, walk people through the fearless golf routine and explain it if you would.
So we start from behind the ball, and the first thing we do is take a really deep breath in through your nose, like a belly breath. The exhale is about 2 times longer than your inhale. You're dumping all the stress, all the anxiety, everything, you're just leaving it there. And then you look out into your fairway and you say, what's my strategy? So my strategy right now is to start it just left of that black and white stake and draw it a little bit towards the green stake. So what's my line? Just left of that black and white stake. So I've got it, I step in. I'm fully committed to my starting line and my shape. And then I go. Now, I didn't hit that where I wanted to, but that's okay. What I'm gonna do is take that exact same breath that I did before. I'm letting everything go. I'm leaving that shot. I'm leaving the negativity. I'm leaving the positivity. It's all gone, and I'm moving on to the next shot.
Right, and so the goal over the golf ball there, and this is true of all our golfers, is we're trying to make fearless swings at precise targets, right? So the situation is going to change. Sometimes it's going to be to win a tournament. Sometimes to make a cut. There's always consequences in golf, but our goal when Ina's standing over a golf ball is making a fearless swing at that target, and the reaction is the most important thing. So instead of reacting and delivering pain in the form of embarrassment and judgment, I accept the outcome of that shot, and we psychologically detach from results. That way, you know, as the variabilities of golf are going up and down, our golfers are consistently running the same routine independent of score.
Gio, Ina, we typically have a segment where we call it, like, you know, our favorite swing. What would your favorite swing be? But since we're doing mental game, what is your favorite sort of mindset that you've seen in the game of golf?
Well, there's two great single observations on the psychological side of the game that we always teach our golfers. One of them is from Ben Hogan. You know, Ben Hogan one time observed, he said, golf to me is the livelihood in doing the thing I love to do. I don't like the glamour, I just like the game. And that bifurcation really illustrates mastery versus ego. Hogan saying, golf isn't about the glamour. It's not about what you get from the game. You know, I don't like the glamour, I just like the game. And then, of course, you know, Tiger Woods. You can't argue with, you know, probably the greatest mental game of all time. And he talks about fear. He says, I refuse to give in to fear, real or imagined. So he's saying, you know, fear doesn't have to be something actually causal. Fear that we conjure up in our own imagination. So Tiger says, I refuse to give in to fear, real or imagined, or to be afraid of anything, consciously or unconsciously, to be afraid of anything or anyone. And so, you know, here at Fearless Golf, we're always trying to coach golfers not to be reckless, but to be fearless, and to know that all the great golfers, Nicklaus, Hogan, Woods, had a way, a strategy for dealing with this fear. And you're captured by Tiger Woods, who's saying, I refuse to give in to this fear, real or imagined. So if I could find a way to combine Tiger and Nicklaus and Hogan, you would have mentally the greatest, you know, sports psychology specimen of all time.
Take us through this whole spectrum of mastery versus ego and the physiological responses people will have oftentimes on a golf course and how they can potentially counter that.
So this idea of what we call, there's three types of goals that psychologists have identified. There's outcome goals, which is what do I want to achieve? Process goals, which is how do I achieve that? But the most important that people don't generally talk about are called achievement goals. And achievement goals are measured by a simple question. So why do you do what you do? The power of why. And we know this is true in all achievement domains, where you see people achieving at a very high level in all of sports, in business, in the markets. They're always clear about their why. And when people aren't clear about their why, it can act as a psychologically suppressive force. So, for example, in the case with golfers, and this is true of Ina, when Ina first came and we started working together many years ago, is we always ask golfers, when they first come to a Fearless Golf Academy, the first question we ask is, why do you play the game of golf? And what psychological research shows is that golfers tend to bundle into one of two categories. So this question of why do you do what you do has been asked several thousand times by psychologists across every achievement domain. And what's fascinating and what's nice is it's one of the parts of psychology that's actually clean. It breaks into two camps, mastery or ego. So when we ask people, why do you play golf? Mastery golfers are driven by, like, intrinsic motivation. I love the game for the sake of the game. That's what we call mastery golf. Tiger Woods is a mastery golfer. Ben Hogan was a mastery golfer. Jack Nicklaus was a mastery golfer. The goal of mastery golfers is to master the craft itself, to learn the game of golf. It's all about golf and your relationship with golf and in a process of continual improvement. But what happens is in the other categories, we call ego golf. And the reason ego golfers play golf is not for the sake of the game, but it's what they can get from the game. It's for validation of the ego. It's to impress other people. It's to make an impression. They use golf as an impression for image management,
The
right?
thing that I hope the viewers understand, too, is that it's usually a confluence of two. I think everybody is not just mastery or just ego, but usually a combination of two. And if you can have a healthy balance of the two, then that's really what we're going for, because as Dr. Gio will talk about later, what the ego tends to breed when you're not confident, you're not playing well, is this whole ego avoid mentality, which is to really avoid playing bad golf instead of trying to play great golf.
Yeah.
And that's when you go down this really bad rabbit hole and your results get bad and you start beating yourself up, and it's this very negative kind of trail of tears.
That'd be fearful golf because you're trying to avoid certain things.
That's right, because like we know in psychology that confidence is a variable. Like no one's confident all the time. And so the natural reaction for an ego golfer, if they hit a bad shot, is embarrassment. Humiliation and embarrassment is psychologically so painful that there's a physiological response. And the way the physiological dominoes fall, it literally becomes almost impossible to play great golf if your brain thinks that there's a chance that you're gonna be humiliated, feel humiliation from a bad golf shot. And so those physiological dominoes, Chris, it triggers in the amygdala, and the amygdala in the brain is like a throw switch, like pulling a fire alarm. So what happens is pupils dilate, so the fairway looks more narrow, the hole looks smaller. Digestion changes, the body starts creating epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, all these stress hormones. The capillaries in the hands constrict. So if you look at your hands,
Sounds awful.
It's terrible, right? So if you look at your hands right now, you see there's pink in your hands? Well, that's because there's blood in your hands called capillaries. Well, those constrict, and all of a sudden the blood leaves your hands so you can't feel the golf club. And so what we know is when golfers start feeling panic or they're fearful, the physiological response is so powerful that it's almost impossible to play great golf.
Gosh, and this seems like this is something we can extrapolate to every walk of life, right? So how do you deal with this physiological response?
I think that if we shift, that shift to mastery and understanding that that pain that we're delivering to ourselves is no longer to happen. So you kind of reassure and you create that process. You lay down the processes of mastery, whatever it is that you're trying to do, in your task, then you, over time, can realize and condition your body to not be fearful and to understand there aren't gonna be the harmful repercussions that you had been imposing on yourself before. And that really, truly leads to freedom eventually.
Okay, so I mean, changing your perspective, that's a big one. What about right now? I don't have time. I'm about to go give a speech in 30 minutes. Are there any techniques that I can do to calm myself down a little bit?
Sure, so there's a psychological and a physiological. So one of my favorite things is when Rory McIlroy sought advice as a young player from Jack Nicklaus. Nicklaus's main advice to him was mistakes are okay. The idea being, you're gonna make mistakes. It doesn't have to be perfect, so don't beat yourself up. If you're going to give a speech or you're even on TV, there's two perspectives. The mastery perspective is, hey, there's gonna be an audience here and my goal is to teach. That's a mastery perspective. There's no fear when you're trying to share information. When it's to impress people, oh, I want them to like me, that's what invites fear into the moment. So you do the psychological shift from ego to mastery, and then physiologically, what about the breath you were talking about earlier?
The deep belly breath, like you almost need to feel your belly come out and expand.
Okay.
And then the exhale should be about double what your inhale is. I think the breathing will always help you dump some of that anxiety and emotion and really clear your thoughts and clear your mind.
All right, so what we're looking for, again, is physiological consistency through the ups and downs of a round of golf. And sort of the best, cheapest, quickest way to keep physiological consistency is this deep breath in and exaggerate the exhale.
Guys, I'm loving this. This has been such a unique show. The mental game is so important. Take us through with some of these physiological responses, how this can affect a golf swing potentially into faults, and how do you manage that?
Sure, you bet, Chris. So everyone who plays golf knows that psychology matters. So it begins with the why, right? The mastery and ego, which we talked about. The psychological then becomes physiological. We talked about the physiological changes, the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, the cortisol, the constriction of the capillaries. Well, where it actually starts to show up and why it shows up on the scorecard is because what it does to the golf swing.
Right, some would argue that the ball only knows what this club face is doing to it, but then you would argue, well, the club knows what the human body and therefore the mind is doing.
100%. What happens in the brain shows up on the scorecard, and the golf swing is the mechanism through which that happens. So one of the things that we know, for example, we know the perception changes, but go ahead and set up over the golf ball. One of the things that we talked about is these physiological changes. When we lose blood in our hands, our nerves lose the ability to feel the golf club. And so what happens is there's an inverse relationship between confidence and tension. We know that, right? So when Ian is confident, right, her grip pressure on the golf club is typically, Ian, what would you say it is?
Probably a 3.
Right, a 3? Go ahead and set the club with a 3. All right, see where the club sets right there? So go ahead and get to your starting position again, right? And I'm gonna ask you to do a 3, and then I'm gonna ask her, so again, we lose the ability to feel the golf club, so grip pressure changes, though the golfer doesn't know. And watch what the impact is on the golf swing. Start with your 3 and go and set it.
Here's
now go
3.
to a 5. And all of a sudden, you see that little different shift, that the club, when we're confident, it sets here. When you get tension in the hands, all of a sudden it sets in a different place. And all of a sudden now go into your transition, Ina, and she's immediately stuck and going into impact. With that tension, you can't release the club. Hence the choker's miss is where? right? It's that
Big right.
block right. So what happens is psychological changes our physiology, specifically in grip pressure. So all of a sudden, instead of setting properly, the club sets here, you're stuck in the golf swing. At impact, you don't release. So the choker's miss is always to the right because of these physiological changes, specifically the tension that shows up in the hands and the forearms, right? Ina, go ahead and show us in slow motion sort of the difference between,
Right.
yeah.
So again, this is a 3, and just moving it to a 5, more realistically, when your capillaries constrict, you're probably going to a 7 or 8 without even knowing it. So to feel that level of 3, you're gripping like a 7 or 8, which is gonna be over here. So 3, 7, 8. And as you can see, I'm not even close to set. And then by the time my lower body moves, my hands are so far behind me, there's no possible way I can square up the club face. And every single miss is gonna be either that big leak right, or it's gonna be a snap hook, because you save it at the last minute.
Okay, because you're saying the choker's misses to the right, but we oftentimes do see some people miss it left under pressure. And you're saying it's from that sort of out of sequence, the hips may be going faster than the rest of the body.
Absolutely, and then it's also that army golf where you're reacting. Remember we talked about dumping and letting go? So you're reacting to the last shot, which was right, and then you overcompensate, and then all you can do is flip because you're not in a position to really square it up accurately. So then you start playing right, left, because you're reacting to prior shots.
That's right. If you're an ego golfer, you then beat yourself up over a bad shot, which spikes tension, you grip it tighter, and then you're in the downward spiral.
Now, okay, let's say you have that tension. Is there anything physically you can do to release that a little bit before you hit your shot?
Ina?
Yeah, so again, we go back to the tension in the hands. You get the blood flowing again, you let loose. And this whole pre-shot and post-shot routine is really to create a bubble around yourself, to not let any of the externalities, the course, your competitors, the scoreboard, the money that's on the line, your boss watching you, none of that should affect you within this, because all you're doing is you're committing to a line, your 100% of your energy is dedicated to hitting that shot, and that's it. You're not letting anything else creep in, and you're executing that shot and letting it go and moving on.
Yeah, and so, you know, a simple thing we try to teach golfers, if you don't want to be, obviously you don't want people thinking about sort of the psychological, physiological effects. I mean, simple terms, soft hands.
Yeah.
Right? So when you lose confidence in golf, because you can't feel, because there's no blood in the hands, what we always say is be a degree softer than you think you need to be. So if you're standing over the golf ball, Ina, right, and you're in a big moment, competition, you've got the leader, this or that, and on a scale of 1 to 10, it feels like your normal 3.
Yep.
You assume that's probably a 5 or a 6, with just soft hands on the golf club. And here's the beauty, by the way, Chris. One of the things we know is when we lose confidence, we get quick and tight, quick and tight. With soft hands, you actually can't swing the club quickly, right? Ina, go ahead and put dead hands on, watch.
All right.
Watch this, with a grip pressure of 1, watch how Ina swings this golf club. And we do this drill with golfers, you come to realize, A, that they're usually tighter than they think they are, but with soft hands on the golf clubs, it solves 2 of the most, 3 biggest psychological dilemmas. All of a sudden, grip pressure comes down and it improves tempo and rhythm.
So and even this 20-second of greatness, this pre-shot routine, right? It gives you that opportunity, like you mentioned, to really focus on the mastery intent as opposed to, you know, getting attached to all these sort of ego things that can run through our minds. So it's like your own little space to refocus that intent on mastery. It also gives you a moment to take your breath, calm your physiology down a bit. And then when you're making a swing, just soft hands, sort of all kind of put together.
That's right.
Simple, very elegant, that's really helpful.
And it solves one of the other problems in the game, Chris, is slow play, right? We're not taking a whole minute or 2. Our pre-shot routines is 20 seconds, bookended by 2 breaths, start to finish. All of a sudden, pace of play increases, golfers are playing better and having more fun.
Gio, Ina, helped our game, improving the pace of play and making us better, happier people at the same time. Amazing episode. Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate it.